So I just watched your video two or three times to get a good feel for what you're trying to say there, and I think the general drift of what you're saying I agree with. Um, I just didn't uh, like the way you worded some things. And so long as we are having a conversation and using words, um, I like to be consistent with the way I use words. Um, that's just the philosopher in me. And I don't ever, or at least I try not to let the philosopher side of me dominate all the other sides of myself, because obviously I cannot attain a spiritual truth with philosophy, but in the same way I cannot attain a philosophical truth with spirituality. Um, so when we're dealing with words and concepts and being consistent with the way we use words and concepts, we're dealing with philosophy. Spirituality, in large part, is unspeakable, though we can use concepts to point towards what it might be. Um, so first, you defined a concept as what happens when the mind grabs experience and creates an essence out of that experience, and then that essence becomes the symbol for the experience, and we sometimes only experience the symbol and forget about life itself. And in that sense, concepts can almost shelter us from the world and give us trap us in this abstract view that has nothing to do with the reality. Um, but in my comments on your last video, where I was trying to show how concepts are metaphorical, um, the metaphor that you use, that the mind has concepts, the metaphor that is based on is that the mind is a container. Um, but the mind, in and of itself, is this immaterial thing that we have to use metaphors in order to even talk about or understand. The mind isn't out here for me to see. So for me to talk about the mind, I must conceptualize it metaphorically as a container which holds ideas and concepts. Um, in reality, the mind isn't necessarily a container. A container is a container, and the mind is the mind. But what am I supposed to say about the mind unless I use a metaphor in order to relate it to something else that I do know? So you also talk about how the brain is not who you are, and I wasn't really trying to say it was. Um, I think that we do have to keep in mind, though, that while the physical body may not be the realest of the real, in the sense that I'm aware right now and I'm in a body, and when I die, um, for me personally, do I think everything just ends? No, probably not. I don't have any firm beliefs about what's going to happen, but I just see the nature of consciousness as something which isn't at all produced by the brain. So I agree with you there. But it is, while we are in this body, in some sense restricted by or related to the brain. Um, and I think part of what it restricts consciousness is the fact that I cannot communicate with you without using my mouth to form sounds. Um, and that when I use my mouth to form sounds, all I can do with the words that I'm creating is create metaphors, whether I'm talking about heaven or hell or anything going on here on earth. I have to create metaphors to describe anything more abstract than a pen. If I want to talk about truth or beauty or justice or um, you know Santa Claus, anything that I can't hold up and show you, I have to use metaphors. I have to compare what I cannot show you in the physical world to something that is in the physical world that it is like. So, like, the mind is a container, when really the mind is not a container at all. The mind is this immaterial whatever, I can't even say. Um, so I agree that the brain is not the source of the mind. But when you said that you are creating your brain, you are creating your body, you said, I am creating my body. You probably didn't mean you personally, because I think I must also be creating my body if what you're saying is true. But that I that creates my body and that creates your body must be the same if it's not this body. So at that level of existence, which you called it I, so it made me think, you're talking about like you personally, your ego, say, is creating your body. I don't agree with that, but I think, metaphorically speaking, there is that ocean um, of unconscious spirit that gives rise to all of this. And at that level, yeah, spirit is creating the material plane, but it's not as though I am in control of what is created. Uh, you said concepts are just words, and that we just made them up. I don't agree with that. I don't think concepts are just words. Concepts can be expressed using words, but for instance, the concept chair can be expressed with the word chair, but the concept itself also includes what it feels like for my body to sit in a chair. It includes what a chair looks like to my visual cortex. Um, it includes, all of this sensory motor information that goes on in here that I can't express with a word or with a sound. So it's more, concepts are more than just words. There's some kind of embodied experience that goes on inside, which I cannot express in words, but that also forms part of that concept. And we didn't just make up concepts. Words may be arbitrary in the sense that I can call this a doohickey, and as long as we agree that it's a doohickey, then it's a doohickey, and it's not a pen. But I think through the process of evolution, the way the form of the body changes and evolves, um, the kind of concepts that we are capable of forming are a natural byproduct of that evolution. So, in other words, the way that our brain has evolved limits the way that we can conceptualize the world, the way that our sensory motor system and our perceptual systems, the way our visual cortex has evolved. All of that functions together to give rise to the ways that we have come to conceptualize the world. We didn't just invent concepts like like Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone. We evolved into the conceptual systems that we have today, and it wasn't as though we made a conscious choice to have this concept for that and this concept for this. It's more or less out of our control the way that our language has evolved, and we like to think that maybe the alphabet was an invention. But even to say that the alphabet was an invention, it seems to me that there must be more of a gray area there. At what point does man break away from his evolutionary heritage and start creating things on his own? There's no ultimate line there. So I don't think we just make up words, though we can do that, it seems. But the concepts they're deeper than words, I think. That's part of our evolution. That's part of our biological inheritance. You talked about layers of reality, and I think a good way of looking at this is that there are four basic levels, or five really, but the fifth level encompasses the prior four: matter, body, mind, soul, and spirit. And this is also how evolution seems to have been progressing. At the beginning, at the Big Bang, there was only matter, and then stars formed, planets formed, and on planets, life sprouted, and you have plants, lower organisms, mammals, and then very complex mammals develop mind, human beings, maybe dolphins, and then soul, the ability to want at least to express God and have religion and spirituality, um, seems to be something only humans do. And then spirit, of course, is the Godhead, the ultimate, which is all of these four things uh, at once.